Hello makers! Well, you know, I'm really excited about the new tiles and panels released from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous as part of the Etcetera line. And once I got started, I kind of was like, I can't stop. And I had my Halloween stuff out. So I made another project with them that is, again, Halloween, but, you know, it's kind of, you know, we're gearing up for the season. So let's get started with the tutorial as to how I made it. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the details at the end. Well, hey makers, I am so sorry. I got really into this project. I had planned it out in my head and I was so excited. I just got started and was partway through it. And I realized, you know what? I haven't done any videotaping for the tutorial or anything like that. So I better stop and at least catch you up with where I'm at. So first, let me start by saying I am going to be making an Etcetera tombstone, but I am going to be using the new Etcetera tiles with it. So to make this project, for the base, you're going to need the small tombstone Etcetera tag from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. So there's a small one and then there's a mini one that's like for a number 8 tag. You want the small tombstone overlay, and what that comes with is it comes with the tag, and then it comes with a base piece, and then a little bit that goes on the base piece, and then it comes with the top overlay that looks like this. So for this project, this is the width of the tag, and I am pairing this with the new Etcetera tiles, 1.5 by 1.5 and 1.5 by 3 inch tiles. Okay, so you only need one package of these tiles and one of the tombstones. When you lay the tiles out on the tag, you're going to notice that the tiles hang over about 1/4 of an inch on each side, as you can see from this piece right here. They're about 1/4 of an inch wider. I did not want to cut that 1/4 of an inch off. I didn't want to go to the trouble. I wanted this to be a quick and easy, fun Halloween make. Therefore, I am not going to use this piece. We're only going to use this little piece at the bottom here. And then we're fine with the top, okay? So our tiles are going to hang over the tag just a little bit, but you can see that they line up perfectly with this and with this, and so it's going to look fine. Next, you are going to need, if you want it to look like this, you can use whatever you have. But if you are wondering what I used, I got out my Worn Wallpaper Halloween set from the Worn Wallpaper Scraps from 2022. So these are the wallpapers from 2022. I went through and I just pulled all the grays and blacks, and I cut them into 1.5 inch strips, and then from each strip, so I cut them off this way. This is how wide they are when they fit in here. So I cut off a 1.5 inch strip from the end, and then what you get out of that is a 1.5 by 3 inch, and then you can cut a 1.5 by 1 inch, and then I think you have a little 1/2 inch left over that I just tossed. You can save it for a project if you'd like. Then I laid them on the tiles. So if I take my papers off, you can see that I have my tiles, and they are all across my tag. And I'm going to be covering them with these pieces of wallpaper and then inking around them. All right, so that's how I did that. Then once I get them all covered, and then I always sand around the edges, then I'll go through and I'm going to adhere them to the tag, and they'll be flush with the bottom down here. So that'll be easy to make sure that they're straight, and then flush next to each other. And then hopefully it'll look like bricks. That's what I was hoping it was going to look like, is kind of like, you know, bricks on this thing. All right, so that's how that's going to go. And then for the top, I took the bottom half of a piece and I just put it on like this, and I really just took my scissors and I kind of cut around it like that, and then I trimmed it down so that it would be in just a little bit from the edge, because it's going to be covered by this, just like that, see? And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this bottom piece and this piece with what's left over of this. And so if I lay it like this, I can just fit, and I only cut one 1.5 inch strip off of the end of that for, where is it? See, just for one of each of these. So one 1.5 inch strip came off, and then that left just enough that I can fit this bottom piece and this, and I can cover it. So what I'm going to do is go around this with a pencil and outline it, and then I'm going to cut it, adhere it onto it. I'll sand it a little bit, and then when I turn it over, it will be a nice dark black outline. And this, I'm going to do the same, and then that will kind of tie in, and then in between will be all these wonderful bricks in the grays with that wonderful worn wallpaper. I just think this is so beautiful. I love this wallpaper. This is where I'm at. I don't have anything glued down other than the paper on each of the parts. So I have the paper glued down on all the parts, and I've gone around and I sanded them with my sanding block. And then I had trouble getting in between here, so I actually cut the end of my sanding block off and went over it with just this little bit here. You could probably use an emery board, but I couldn't remember where I put my emery boards. So I haven't inked these, but I did put the paper on all the tiles. Those are all sanded. And here you can see, if I take this bottom one off, you can see how that they're just that little 1/4 inch wider than the tag. And again, that's not bothering me in the slightest. So I'm going to be putting these on there. It still provides a great base. And then the overlay is what I'm really looking for, this overlay. So when you get that on there, I think it looks great. Now you can see a little bit of it sticking up back here because of the length of the tiles. So this would normally be down a little farther, but then this is going to hang off the end, and I didn't really want it to hang off the end that much. So I'm just going to go over the corners of this tag up here with some of the leftover paper so that whatever little bits show will just look like part of the sculpture. So see, it's not that bad. And it doesn't really bother me too much, especially if it's going to be covered with similar paper. Putting the tiles on and line them up with the bottom. And then once this bottom row is lined up, then the rest of these will line up very easily like that. And then once those are all completely in place, then I'll go ahead and attach this, and I'll attach this, and then all I have to do is start decorating. This was really fast. I am loving these Etcetera tiles and panels. They're really fast for creating something. And so they're really good for using any of the backdrops paper or wallpaper or any of that you would have on hand and doing it very quickly. So both of the projects so far that I have made with the tiles and the panels have just been a snap. So I think you're going to absolutely love this new product from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous. I have everything glued down with collage medium, so everything's in place. I am going to probably add some grit paste to kind of cover up some of these little areas that I feel like are a little too off or unaligned. And then maybe down here a little bit where I feel some would kind of collect. And then I'm going to start figuring out what I'm going to do to decorate this. All right. So I'm breaking into this tutorial as Future Tammy. I'm actually in the middle of making a bunch of things, but because I know that the release is coming up for the Etcetera, I want to be able to share the tutorial with you, and I'm not happy with the information I downloaded. So I wanted to give you some more, just a tiny bit more information and some options, because I used last year's worn wallpaper scraps to cover it, right? So we've already gone over that. And then to finish it up, I wanted to use some things. And so because I knew that we had last year's ephemera and all of that and paper dolls, I used those to decorate it. But if you didn't get those, or you're new to Tim Holtz, or you already used some stuff, but you want a look that's similar, I went through this year's ephemera and layers because things have been kind of combined a little bit. So I have the layers and I have the ephemera, and I pulled some things to give you some options. So there are some things in the ephemera that are very similar to what I used. And, you know, I used one of the worn wallpaper flowers behind my paper doll. And so if you don't have the worn wallpaper that you're using in the layers, there are some flowers that you could use behind your paper doll. So there's that to keep in mind, you know, that you could cut apart. I cut one of these apart, and I put part of it down and part of it just kind of coming out of his shoulder. So one of these would probably be enough for what I did, but there you go, you have some options. Secondly, for the ephemera that I put in a little cluster behind him in this year's ephemera pack, there is the same condemned tag that I put behind my doll. And so it actually was kind of like this, with the flower coming out there and then a little bit of a flower here. I had like something like this was here, and then I had like this and this kind of going on, you know. So you can just kind of pick some things, make your layout. Then I added for him to stand on the Made in England, and I popped it up on just a little chipboard so that it had some dimension. So I put some chipboard behind this, and I actually tore it and then put the chipboard behind it. And then I used just the little other bits just to kind of layer up here. I think I had a little bit coming. Maybe this one was kind of coming out from here with the number. Anyway, just little bits of this that I tore up and put in a couple of different places. If you don't have the wallpaper and you're not going with the wallpaper, and maybe you're doing backdrops, because there's some fabulous backdrops that you could use in this year's and last year's worn or backdrops. So these are things that you could, you know, use with that. And then in this year's ephemera, we actually have a Made in England strip, and you can see that it is a little bit different color, and it is a little bit messier, just a little bit, but it's pretty much the same. So you do get this in this year's ephemera pack. So that's great if you don't have the worn wallpaper and you're using paper. Okay, then I looked through and I was like, all right, you know, there's also other things you could use if you didn't want to go with the tag look. Love this card. You could use this physician thing. There's, you know, lots of other little bits and baubles that you could add, you know, here and there behind a paper doll. Okay, so there you go. Just lots of different options. Just grab some pieces and just kind of layer them over and under each other. And, you know, different sizes, and some with script and some with numbers and that kind of thing. Okay. The other thing was, then I had my paper doll on here, right? So let's just go ahead and stick that across there. I could not find the paper doll that I used, so I'm giving you a couple of options from this year's release. So there were, hi X, how you doing, buddy? So there are these pictures in this year's release, and so I thought this kind of looked like a younger version of maybe this guy, who kind of reminds me of Charles Dickens for whatever reason. I always call him Charles. So, you know, you could have him there, and then you could have this in the ornate frame up at the top, Or I was kind of looking at her and I thought she kind of looked like a younger, happier version of this lady, who could be pointing to herself like, you know, yeah, that's what I used to be, but then tragedy struck. And then all you have to do is take your snippets. This is this year's snippets, last year's snippets, any snippets, and you just go through and then you pick and you decide what story your paper doll has. And then you would just, you know, attach those up in the corner. So that's what I did to make the focal point on the tombstone for today's make. So anyway, thank you for letting me be future Tammy to come back in and explain that. I was under the gun when I was shipping and didn't realize that I had completely skipped over a portion of the tutorial. So thanks for letting me pop in and do that. Now I'll get you back to the wrap up. All right, again, another super simple project that went together so quickly and so easily. I'm telling you, these Etcetera tiles make putting a project together just so easy, such a cinch. All right, so let's go ahead and look at it. Now remember, I told you that the tiles were a little bit wider than the tag on the back, and so I altered the bottom part of it, and I'm totally fine with this. It doesn't bother me at all. If it bothers you, maybe you attach them, and then if you have like a jigsaw or something, you can go ahead and you know, trim down there and cut them off along the side before you add any grit paste or anything. But really, honestly, for me, I'm totally fine with this. I love it. Okay, so I just used that little bottom part as I explained in the tutorial. And then I went around each one with a little bit of distress crayon and my water brush, and sometimes it kind of went out a little bit, but I went around all the edges, and you can even see here with that distress crayon and water brush because I really wanted those crevices between each of the tiles to really show. Then on the top here, I showed you how I cut out the paper to adhere onto it, and then I thought this was kind of fun. In the Halloween paper dolls, there were some photos and some snapshots and some things like that. And I thought this guy looked like a younger version of this guy. And so I wanted to have this like it was on his tombstone. And then this like where I told the story of him on the front of the tombstone. Instead of having the epitaph tell the story, I wanted this to tell the story of him. So that's kind of why I did it this way. These amazing papers are from the 2022 Halloween wallpapers. Aren't they gorgeous? The wallpaper scraps. And then this little bit of floral back here is from the wallpaper scraps. So amazing. And it just has that wonderful wallpaper texture. I love the wallpaper. So if you have that, get it out. It just takes one little 1.5 inch strip for most of it, except for up at the top here. But for these, it's just one little 1 inch strip, 1.5 inch strip. So great. I even added from the wallpaper this little bit down here, made in England. It's part of his story, as well as some of this back here is part of his story. You know, kind of as a pharmacist and a chemist. And then the story says, an eccentric but very estimable gentleman in an unfamiliar silent place, moody, despairing, he must have gone crazy. So that tells you a little bit about his sad story and his sad end. But at one time he was well respected. So that's all there is to this piece. Now you could, of course, add a lot more to it, but I really wanted these beautiful tiles covered with that wallpaper to show through and to just shine. And so I really wanted them to be a lot of the focal point and to kind of keep the rest of the stuff in the center here, so that we could see them. So again, this really went together so quickly. And so if you are inspired by this and you would like to get any of the products that I used to make this, you can go to the description of this video. I have some links there. I also have some links on my blog at playswellwithpaper.blogspot.com, which reminds me, if I didn't answer something or if I wasn't clear in the tutorial, please contact me below with a question, or on my blog. You can contact me and I'll be glad to answer it to the best of my ability and try and help you out so that you can make your own version of an Etcetera tombstone using the new Etcetera tiles. All right. So I want to wish you a very creative day.